Just going to give people a chance to connect on there and then we'll make a start. Welcome to those just joining. The numbers are going up. That's what we like to see. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining the last session of the day. It's going to be a learning lab on water security indicators. So again, please make sure to use the chat, the Q&A functions, and everything there. It'd be great to hear where you are watching from. We also have interpretation to French as normal using the button at the bottom of the screen there. But actually, I'll hand straight over to you. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Luke. Very good afternoon to all of you, those that are joining us virtually from the respective national hubs in the countries and also here in Suva. Let me quickly introduce myself. My name is Exley Taloiburi. I will be your moderator for this learning lab this afternoon. I work with the Pacific community as the Deputy Director for Disaster and Community Resilience. Thank you very much for your interest in this learning lab, which focuses on measuring water security for Pacific resilience. You may be wondering, why is this learning lab important? It's important because water security is critical to climate and disaster resilience in the Pacific. But what are our targets for water security, and how can we measure progress towards achieving them? Insufficient data, a lack of data coordination, and difficulties in applying some global indicators to the Pacific context mean that water security is not always well measured in our region. While the Pacific has made considerable progress in applying global and locally developed monitoring platforms for water security, much more can be done to support these efforts and fully utilize the information to measure our progress, identify needs, and inform investments. The objectives of our learning lab this afternoon includes one, to explore how water security is relevant to resilience of Pacific communities, share definitions of water security along with measures and indicators of how these relate to various sectors and Pacific contexts. Secondly, look at opportunities to utilize this data better to support evidence-based decision-making at all levels. Today, we are very privileged to be joined by four very experienced technical experts around our region who possess extensive experience in water security. If I may quickly introduce them first before we move on to the actual learning lab. Our first speaker is Mr. Dave Hebler-Waite. He is the Water Security and Governance Coordinator at SPC. Our second speaker is Bronwyn Powell, Water and Waste Specialist with the International Water Center, Griffith University. Our third speaker, Misileti Masoe Satuala. She is the Pacific Water and Wastewater Association Development Project Coordinator. And our final speaker for this afternoon is Mr. James Robertson, Water Specialist with UNICEF Pacific. With that, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, I will now quickly hand over to Bronwyn to put on online some questions that we would like to start off with, just to understand a bit about your perception and also your awareness of water security before we start off with the first speaker. Over to you, Bronwyn.
Many thanks, Exley. I'll just share. We would like to start, because this is an interactive session. First of all, I should say Bulavanaka from Brisbane, Mianjin, which is on the land of the Turrbal and Yagara people, so I acknowledge traditional owners here. We are looking very much forward to this session today on water security in the Pacific and how we can measure it. We're very interested in your views, so we're starting with a Menti. This is the QR code, which you can scan with your phone to hop on, or you can go on www.menti.com. And this is the code 13358682. We'll start with that. And I'll ask Karen to start sharing the results as you start filling that in.
Sorry, Bronwyn,
Yes.
we can't see the screen that you're sharing.
Oh dear. It seems a bit frozen.
Can you just close?
Maybe I'll
and
stop
try and
share
open again?
and see if I can ask my colleague Karen Deveni to share. Can you still hear me okay though?
Yeah, if you just try unsharing and sharing again, it might just restart that.
Yeah, it seems quite frozen, Luke. I can't do anything. So in that case, I did put the link, the website, www.menti.com, in the chat box. I think you have access to that. And it's 1335-8682. I might have to exit and come back in, and hopefully Karen can share the results as that's happening.
Great. We can see that one. That's perfect.
Thank you very much. I can see now we have about 33 responses.
Oh, wonderful. That's great. So what responses have we got there? Sustainability, accessible. Yeah, water. So water is accessible to everyone. Water is important for life. We need it to be clean. So that's about water quality. Good to see a bit of groundwater being mentioned there with groundwater replenishment. That's wonderful. I think you've touched on many of the topics that we'll be covering today in our water security session. So I'll hand now to Dave Hebblethwaite, who'll give a bit of a presentation on an overview on how water security links to broader Pacific resilience. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you, Bronwyn. And it works for me. I'll just share the screen at my side as well. Okay. Thank you. So as actually mentioned, today is really about this learning lab is about exploring further how we measure water security for resilience. And for those of you who were in the plenary this morning, we're talking about a couple of ways of measuring water security in the Pacific. One of them was the 15 litres of sphere standards, the breakfast bucket volume. There's many others. And seeing water security is so much broader than just amount of drinking water. There's so many other components to it. There are many ways globally in which to measure it. There were a few questions that came up on the sessions this morning, the technical sessions, around the question of how are we measuring water security and what are we doing with the information? And I think the second part of that question is really critical for the region. And those of us who work in water security, almost on a weekly basis, we come across somebody who's really knowledgeable, really connected in to the region and its issues. And we're often surprised at the lack of knowledge on water security. And really, it's very difficult to say how we're going in water security in many respects. And certainly that's at all levels, whether it be at from the leadership level down at the community level. It's often very easy to tell. People know if their water is secure or not. But how we measure it as a region and nationally can be a challenge. And of course, we're not just talking about measuring access to water. We're talking about measuring how we are prepared to deal with the extremities of water, whether that be floods, droughts, or hydrometeorological disasters. And some of the speakers today will touch on that, and we hope there's some good discussion in the chat. But just to start off the discussion today, I wanted to just give an example of how important it is to get an indicator right. And some of you might be familiar with the World Risk Report, which comes out every year. There's a World Risk Index, which is based on 4 different parameters of exposure, susceptibility, coping capacity, and adaptive capacity. In 2021, there were 6 Pacific Island countries in the top 20. Pacific Island countries consistently took up the top 3 places in that World Risk Index as being the most exposed to the impacts of natural disaster. And that's something that we sort of came to take for granted, that the Pacific was always up there. And as compared to, say, Australia, which was ranked 123. And when it came to the 2022 World Risk Report, there was one parameter change in the index. And that was the change on country rankings. No Pacific Island country was in one was in the top 20, that was Papua New Guinea. We had countries, Vanuatu, which was number 1, shifted to number 49. Australia, on the other hand, which was ranked at number 123, went up the rankings to 22. And this was basically because for the first time, the index considered population size and not just proportions of populations that were affected. So it really meant the Pacific was not showing on that index as really being up there in terms of the world's most risk-affected countries. We know this is not the case, and we know that the Pacific regularly has natural disasters, impacts that are up around 30, 40, up to 60 or more percentage of impact of GDP. By comparison, the largest natural disaster in Australia's modern history was the Millennium Drought, which has been estimated to impact between 1 and 1.5% of its GDP. So we can see making a small change in an index or in an indicator can actually make a huge difference. So in the Pacific, we're really obviously very keen to see how indicators can be tailored to suit our needs, and most importantly, how the results of measurement can be used to inform evidence-based decision-making at every level, whether it be from the community level to the cabinet level, and even at the international level. So with that, Exley, I'll pass back to you, and look forward to the dialogue today.
Thank you very much, Dave, for setting the scene and providing that brief overview. I will hand back to Bronwyn again to also show again some questions here.
So I think we're going to go back to our Menti. You should be still logged in to that. And we're trying to understand, we're very interested in what sectors you work in. So if you could answer what sector you work in and see who we have participating today. And then we're going to look at how we interact across sectors. So how important is water to you and your sector? So we'll just see how this populates as we go. Because we do know that water is cross-cutting across multiple sectors. So hopefully we have a nice cross-section, and I understand that will probably be the case. And you should be able to click through to the next question, which is also about what kind of organisation you're working in, and then also how important you think it is, how important you think water security is to your sector, how fundamental it is. So we have a bit of government, civil society, private sector. Wow, complete cross-section. That's great. Can we go back to the previous slide quickly, Karen? Okay, so we have a lot of climate change and disaster response specialists here today. That's wonderful. And a bit of water and sanitation too. Excellent. And a representation, fisheries, environment, women's issues. Yeah, let's go forward, Karen. Wow, and across lots of different organisations, that's great to see. So all able to work in these areas from different angles and different perspectives. And let's see, next question, how important we think water, wow, there we go, strongly agree. So is water security important to the resilience of your sector? Strongly agree is very high there. So I think we can all see that water security is fundamental to the functioning of pretty much all the sectors that are represented here today, at least. Okay, that's fantastic. Thanks, Karen. So those who haven't had a chance to populate that, please keep going while we keep presenting. So now I will move to my presentation on water security indices. Hopefully you can see it this time. How's that looking? Is that okay, Luke?
Yes, we can see your presentation,
Oh,
Bronwyn.
wonderful.
It was great.
Okay, so very happy to be here today, and thank you for joining us. As I said, I'm joining from International Water Centre at Griffith University in Brisbane. And the topic we were interested in looking at is how do we measure water security in the Pacific? So we all have agreed it's very, very important, but how can we measure it and keep track of whether we're doing well, progressing and improving water security or not? So just to start with, there are positives and negatives of water. On the positive side, we have the fact that it's critical to life. And as Lucia Sefaliao, the CEO of PWWA, mentioned this morning, in the opening session, it does play these negative and positive roles. On the positive side, it's important for drinking, washing, hygiene, also for food production, essential to healthy ecosystems and the ecosystem services they provide. However, it, as we know, can also be a destructive force when there's too much or too little water. These negative impacts we experience are things like flooding, drought, and erosion. And if many of you working in disaster risk areas will be very familiar with these kinds of chronic.
Hi,
acute.
Bronwyn.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. A message from the Tuvalu Hub. They can't hear you clearly. Can you kindly speak up, please?
Is it okay for you, Eckersley? Can you hear me?
We can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, that's good to know. I'll just hold my mic a bit closer. So on the negative side, flooding, drought, erosion, as I mentioned, and these kind of destructive forces are linked to poverty and conflict and all those negative aspects that come from those emergencies. And we do know that climate change is exacerbating these negative forces because it is intensifying the hydrological cycle. So these impacts are more frequent, more intense, and also less predictable. So we want to be able to define water security, and we need it to be a holistic definition. So one way of dealing with the complexities of these positive and negative aspects of water is to bring them together into what we call water security. So one common definition is the availability of acceptable quality and quantity of water for health, livelihoods, ecosystems, and production, coupled with an acceptable level of water-related risk to people, environments, and economies. So the main point of this is that the definition of water security is holistic. It aims to encompass multi-dimensional benefits and uses of water, while at the same time accounting for the impacts of water-related risk and disasters. One index that aims to bring this all together and quantify this water security is called the Asian Water Development Outlook. It's a regionally specific index for Asia Pacific, and there's multiple sub-regions within that. It's developed by the Asian Development Bank, and International Water Centre has worked with Asian Development Bank since the first AWDO in 2007 on the multiple iterations. The definition of it now within the ADO, or Asian Water Development Outlook, is defined around 5 dimensions. So it aims to be holistic by taking into account rural household water security, economic water security, urban water security, environmental, and also water-related disaster security. So we need to understand that measuring and quantifying water security is important because it helps us to understand whether any progress is being made in the situation for communities and countries through time. And it also, in so doing, helps us identify priority areas of need. So it has been been developed over the last 15 years. And each of these key indicators, so the 5 key dimensions, is made up of multiple indicators. So each key dimension is actually an index of its own. And then the composite index, which is brought together to define what they call the National Water Security Rating, is between 1 to 5, with 5 being the best. So when we apply this and look at some of the results of bringing together all the data from the multiple indicators into these key dimensions, you can see the results there in the chart for the sub-regions. On you can see the Central, West, East Asia and Pacific there across 3 different periods of data collection, with 2020 being the latest in red. So we can see in that graph the Pacific water security has improved since 2013. However, it does have the lowest average water security compared to other regions. But it does, we can't see it in this graph, but one of the key dimensions, environmental water security, Pacific actually performs the highest. You can find out a lot more about this index on the Asian Development Bank website. There's an interactive dashboard. Karen will provide the link in the chat if you want to follow up further, where you can see how each country and your country performs against the indicators that are set through the Asian Water Development Outlook. Another index, which has been developed recently by United Nations University, is called the Global Water Security Assessment. And this is obviously not regionally specific, has a larger scoring set between 1 to 100, but again, draws on a whole set of globally available data sets. You can see them on the right there. And it also aims to be holistic. In this case, their definition includes 10 different components. We can provide the link if you're interested to follow up in that one as well. So I've explained that measuring water security is important. It's not straightforward, however, and there are strengths to the existing approaches. So one of the strengths is that there are national measures that feed into global measures, and these are the global data sets that we use to create the ADO. One of the important ones and most commonly referenced is the Joint Monitoring Program of UNICEF and WHO, and there's regular collection of data and sharing of data for SDG 6, water and sanitation for all. We do see also that data availability continues to improve, which is great. So each time the JMP is released, there is increasing amounts of data available. For example, in the latest round, a lot more information was available on hand washing access in a number of new Pacific countries that hadn't provided that before, which was great to see. The other thing about putting information and indicators into an index is that it does make it easy for decision makers to make comparisons across countries and across regions to understand the severity and the importance of addressing water security. We still have a number of challenges, though, in creating these indices. There are huge data gaps, especially for small island developing countries. So that global index that I shared, there were only 24 of 58 small island developing states that could be assessed, because 34 did not have data on 4 or more of the water-related SDGs. There is also a need for much better and improved data management and sharing, and also systems need to be in place to assure that the quality of data being provided is reliable and robust. I will leave it there. There is a lot more we could talk about on indicators and the use of indicators and how applicable they are to all contexts. These are attempts to create globally comparable indices to define water security. And I'll leave it there for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bronwyn, for that presentation. We would take a short pause and put up the Menti question again on the screen. If I can request Karen's support or Bronwyn.
Yeah, Karen would. I think someone else is sharing, but if Karen could share, we can see the results of the Menti. Okay, so our question was, what issues should be included to understand water security? So we have a whole range of answers there. Historical decline, scarcity, it's come up a few times. Quality, water quality. Contextualization, yes, understanding the context is critical. So that, for example, in that last, in ADO, one of the environmental parameters is around connectivity of rivers, which isn't applicable to all Pacific Island countries, especially the atoll countries. It's great to see all these results coming in. Thanks so much. I think we might leave it there. Our next presentation is from Miss Aletti from PWWA, which is Pacific Water and Wastewater Association. So you can answer that Menti question as she is presenting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bronwyn. If I may now kindly invite Miss Aletti to please take the floor, and you have the presentation on the screen as well.
Thank you, Bronwyn, and thank you, Exley. Talofa, everyone. As earlier mentioned, I'm Miss Aletti from the Development Pacific Water and Wastewater Association. We're based in Apia, and I will be presenting on benchmarking in PWWA. Before I go on to the benchmarking, I just want to provide a brief outline of what Pacific Water and Wastewater Association is all about. So our vision is sustainable water and sanitation for the Pacific people. The mission we have as part of our work is to strengthen advocacy, collaboration, and capacity building for sustainable, resilient water and sanitation. As an association, we have 30 Pacific water utilities as members from 21 Pacific countries. We also have more than 50 allied members, and these are water suppliers. And these are mostly based in New Zealand and Australia. We consider ourselves as the peak body to advocate water in the Pacific, and benchmarking is one of our core functions. We also have our annual conferences every year to discuss and share water and wastewater successful stories. Our annual ministerial forum to address water challenges at that high level. And also we have a young water professional program, which runs every year as well in parallel of our conferences. This is basically to build on the capacity and leadership for the young water professionals. In terms of, sorry, I'll just go back to that slide. In terms of a whole holistic picture in the Pacific on what's covered under Pacific Water, as you can see from our name, is Pacific Water and Wastewater. So we have two components under our association. We have 30 utilities, and they all supply water. Only 17 of those utilities supply wastewater, offer the wastewater services. Also with regards to population, we service 3.729 million people in the Pacific, and that's around 97% of the population. With regards to wastewater, we service 1.150 million, 47% of total residents living in wastewater services. We have 489,200 connections in terms of water supply, and we have around 120,000 in terms of wastewater services. For water, the main issue that usually always comes up every year during benchmarking is the non-revenue water. It's pretty high in the Pacific, and from the data we collected in 2023, it was 48%, which means 48% of the water is lost and it's not being charged for. Treated water, the wastewater that is collected under by our utilities are being treated, and 99% of them are treated. So we have a turnover of 365 million for water services and 79 million for wastewater, and employ 2,455 professionals. 392 of them are women, and 800 For wastewater, 105 of them are women. Okay, just a brief history on benchmarking. This was initiated back in 2010 by Pacific Water and Wastewater Association with the support of ADB and World Bank. The indicators for benchmarking were mainly developed to focus on the performance of utilities. The IBNet is a data collection instrument that is used to collect the data, and the analysis of these data are jointly done by Pacific Water and World Bank. The data was collected systematically through 2010 up to 2023. We started collecting data for gender and tariff back in 2015. So now benchmarking is a valuable source of information for not only Pacific Water and Wastewater utilities, but also for donors and our partners, for their project preparations and investment plans. So all of these data are available. We also have our own database, and that's the link if you want to, have a look at the data that we have. And you're most welcome to send us an email if you need some more information on the data. In terms of the process that we go through to collect these data, this is collected annually, and we download the toolkits from our database website. Throughout the years, we've had some utilities who are very small utilities, such as Tokelau, Kiribati, requesting a simplified version of the toolkits, as it was most of the information that we were asking from the toolkits were too complicated for these utilities and doesn't apply to them. So we've sort of simplified some of these toolkits and to cater for the utilities' needs. Once these data are collected, we upload them on the website that we have, and the link is there as well. And we analyze these data, as mentioned earlier, jointly with World Bank. And then we produce reports every 2 years. And these reports are available on our websites, on the ADB website, and also on the World Bank websites. The data collecting process and the analysis that we do is also used to determine the awards for utility performance. And these are usually presented at our annual conferences every year. In terms of the challenges, of course,
Sorry
there's
to
always
interrupt,
challenges.
Ms. Aletti, but
Yeah.
you have about 1 more minute.
Okay. So these are some of the challenges we have. The ownership of the utilities is something that we've always, ownership of the data is something that we always encourage our utilities to take ownership of these data and use them for their proposals or they put through to donors. In terms of opportunities, we are now working with the World Bank on a new IBNet. It's a new, inclusive of new management indicators. And we're also working with UNICEF to see how benchmarking that PWWA does and its indicators can contribute to the achievements of SDG 6. From this benchmarking, we also are able to identify gaps for capacity building for our utilities and also encourage our utilities to invest in data solutions. Gender, as earlier mentioned, we are collecting data for gender as part of our benchmarking. As you can see from the slide there, 14% of these female are staff engineers. 22% of all, there's been an increase since 2015 of 7.5, and 70% of these ladies work in the administrative and management positions. For PWWA, making available these gender data. I'm finishing. Statistics
Okay.
as part of PWWA benchmarking aims at supporting governance reforms and community resilience through women in management leadership. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Leti. And you did mention the partnership with UNICEF. So with that, I will now quickly hand over to James with the UNICEF Pacific team to carry on from here. Over to you, James.
I'll share the screen. Miss Leti, do you mind stop sharing, please?
Thank you. Good morning, all. Thanks to my fellow panelists. Just wait for my slides to come up. Thanks, Bronwyn. I can see it's coming now. Okay, so I think we've had a few different frameworks and indicators mentioned today, and I think I just wanted to point out. Often when we talk about SDG 6, we just look at what's in that little box there on the left, but in the big scheme of things, SDG 6 is a lot bigger than the MDGs and does cover a lot more in terms around water security. There are indicators around the ecosystem and the environment as well. And that's really just what I wanted to sort of highlight some of those points today. Next slide, please. So there are about 11 indicators under the SDG. There's various custodians, different UN agencies. They're globally, probably 2/3 of countries are able to report on those indicators. In the Pacific, it's quite a bit lower than that for a lot of the challenges that have already been mentioned by my fellow presenters this morning. I put up some QR codes and links there in the slide so you can dig in to see on the methodology there. I would say maybe the JMP is the one people are familiar with, and that's much more focused on the drinking water, sanitation and hygiene. But there are increasing efforts and they're developing around things like water quality, water efficiency, water stress. But definitely some of these indicators aren't very well adapted to Pacific countries, and that's where work from Pacific countries and all of us is needed in making sure that the specific needs are considered and integrated into the way that the methodologies are developed. And to be honest, these are still ongoing. You can even get the snapshot of the overall SDG 6 indicators, all of these indicators for Oceania, excluding Australia and New Zealand, and you will see if you click into that there's some pretty big gaps there. Okay, next slide. So in terms of who does what, UNICEF, as you've heard, and WHO cover the drinking water and sanitation. There's the GLASS report, there's Aquastat, GEMS, and various other mechanisms for looking at the other parts of the water security. Again, these are under development and they're closely related with some of the indexes that were mentioned earlier in Bronwyn's presentation. Next slide, please. So as UNICEF, we focus on the joint monitoring project along with WHO. So I just thought I'd dig into a little bit more on that in the Pacific. The JMP team, who are based, we feed into that, and they're based all around the world, has analysed about 280 different data sets since 1980 and gone through them with a fine-tooth comb to see what we can pull out for JMP. So this includes surveys like the MIX and DHS surveys, some other household index of economic security surveys. It includes data collected through national censuses, and it includes administrative data. So this is data from PWWA and other sources. And as you can see there, you can see how the number of data sets has evolved over time. That big bit of blue on the right is the PWWA IBNet data. So there's a lot of data coming from there. But not many of these data sets can get out data that's useful for the JMP at the moment. The questions aren't standardized, data sometimes just simply isn't published, and definitely the SDG indicators are not so simple. But you can see there in terms of the usable data points, there's much more surveys that are giving us stuff we can use at the moment rather than admin and utility data. Next slide, please. So what's really interesting is when you do look into the utilities, we pull together some analysis here comparing the PWWA data with the JMP data. A huge number are covered of the population in the Pacific are covered by utilities, and more than 12 countries is more than 50% of the population. Definitely for PNG, that skews everything, as is always the case with statistics in the Pacific. But if you exclude them, it's more than 50% of the population are covered under utilities, and hence IB net data is super important to us. Next slide, please. So just as a quick comparison in terms of the advantages and disadvantages, I won't read it all out here because I know we're pushed for time. But the long and short of it is, if we can get admin and utility data tracking SDG 6 data, JMP for drinking water, sanitation, hygiene, but potentially beyond as well, it's more frequent, it's lower cost, probably more resilient. Whereas censuses, they're often done every few years, 10 years, and surveys relatively infrequently as well, and they're infrequent and expensive. So the more admin utility data we can use to feed into this would, I think, be better for all. Next slide. So just to sum up, I think it's really interesting to look into how these integrated monitoring methodologies are being developed, and really it's good to drill in and make sure that the Pacific context is properly understood, and really see if we can use more admin utility data to make our data collection more regular, more efficient, and more locally owned. A key one is there's still data sets that are there, but they're not shared. So finding them, making them more accessible, getting them shared on the Pacific Data website, the microdata accessible, and engaging with governments is a critical way forward. And of course, you can seek support from the relevant indicator custodians to help develop. I'll stop there because I know we're pushed for time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, James. That's very interesting. I might just quickly refer to Bronwyn, if we can just quickly show the results of the final Menti.
Yes, thanks, Exley. I think it would be wonderful, Karen, if we can see the results of those final two questions. So this one I find really interesting. So we asked, did you know about that Pacific water utilities collect and share data publicly? And more than half said no, they didn't know that. So that's nice that we've been able to share something, and you've all been able to learn something. Half of you have learned something new today about where data is available for utilities. So thanks so much for sharing that, Mr. Letty. And then the next question we asked is, what organisations have a role in monitoring water security? There's a lot of different answers there. Statistics Office, yes. Government, regional organisations, regional authorities, utilities is in there now. Civil society, yes. Great. It looks like there's quite a range. So I think that we can definitely say it's a shared responsibility to collect and share data that on indicators that are relevant to water security. Dave, I wondered if you wanted to close with some finishing remarks, or we hand straight to Eckersley now. I think it's over to you, Eckersley. I can't hear Dave.
Thank you very much, panelists, and to all of you that have taken your time to join us for this learning lab this afternoon. Two key things. It is clear that water security is critical and is also vulnerable to climate change. We've also learned that there is need for a holistic approach that takes into account multidimensional considerations. And finally, the importance of partnerships has come out strongly in all the presentations this afternoon. I hope that provides an accurate summary of the Learning Lab discussions this afternoon. And with that, I thank our speakers. I also thank those of you that have joined us here in Fiji and from across the Pacific and outside of the Pacific. You all have a good afternoon. That brings to an end our Learning Lab for this afternoon. Thank you very much.